Hello everyone, I'm Santiago and today I'm gonna be testing the G4560 with the GeForce GTX 1050 Ti, since many of you requested that on my G4560 plus GTX 1060 video, so here it is. I'll be testing 15 games this time around. Sorry for the long video, but I have to explain some things and show you a little bit of each game, so I hope you enjoy the video. So first of all, I'm going to show you Battlefield 1 1080p with ultra textures, ultra texture filtering, medium lightning quality, FX quality, post-process quality and mesh quality, the terrain and undergrowth quality on high, anti-aliasing turn off, and ambient occlusion on SSAO, and on very intensive CPU bound moments I drop as low as 40-45 frames per second, but I can be over 60 on less intensive moments, so that's good. The game is totally playable and the multiplayer is still enjoyable. But remember, this is the worst case scenario, a very intensive multiplayer match, so in other maps this shouldn't happen as often, so yeah, not bad at all.
We are losing objective Duff.
Ammo! Pick it up! There's some ammo! This position is under attack!
We are losing objective Duff.
Dying Light, I'm using 1080p once again on pretty much high settings. Shadow map size was kept on high to stay over 60 frames per second, and the view distance was below 30%, since that's a great FPS boost and it's not really that different if you compare it side by side, and the performance impact is huge. And I also turn off PCSS shadows and depth of field. Those kill performance too. Fallout 4, I'm going to be using a mix between medium and high pretty much, and I'll be below 60 frames per second when I'm looking far into the distance. You'll see that in this video. I'm in Diamond City. I had a lot of performance issues here. I cannot reach 60 frames per second. This happens very often when you are roaming through the map, and the frame rate is unlocked, so you can see how much the CPU can push. But yeah, still playable. GTA 5, I'm going to be using 1080p on a mix between high and very high, on pretty much high settings, with some other stuff on very high, without advanced graphics. I'll be first exploding as many cars as I can in the center of the city, then I'll fly off in a chopper trying to load as many assets as I can so I stress the CPU more. And I was surprised to see that it was at 60 frames per second with some drops when there was a lot going on, but so far it was playable and I have no complaints, at least for me. Hitman, I'll be using pretty much high settings with shadow resolution on medium, and then I'll lower the level of detail. Since we have some CPU bottleneck, you'll see that the CPU usage will be high and the GPU usage will be below 90% on places with a lot of NPCs. This game is not really that well optimized, so keep that in mind. But yeah, still playable. I suggest capping it at 40 frames per second and it won't be that bad. You can still play just fine.
Hey, what's up?
I could just about strangle you. Stomach cramps. What kind of idiot eats shellfish from a buffet in this heat?
Relax, Pam. Hired a local cameraman. Freelance. Guy, he'll be fine.
Oh, well, if you're not worried, Tyler, then I'm not worried. After all, it's not like this is a very important interview. I mean, it's certainly not like it's an exclusive or anything.
Pam, you remember that talk we had about blood sugar? Eyes open! Got them. Don't do anything, please!
Just Cause 3, I'll be doing 1080p, high settings, with textures on very high and some stuff turned off. I'll be blowing up a gas station, a couple gas stations, better said, and you'll see that on those moments it drops below 60 frames per second, and when I'm flying around in the map you'll see a lot of drops below 60. That's due to the CPU. A lot of people says, oh, it's because of the RAM. Well, not really, at least not here. You'll see that the free RAM value, it's around 1 to 1.9 gigabytes free, and I'm using 8 gigabytes, so if you just subtract the free RAM value from 8 gigabytes, you'll find out that the game uses 7 gigabytes of RAM at the most, so it's not a RAM issue, as many said, it's a problem with the CPU. You can check a link in the description below where I compare an i3 versus an i7 on this game, and I can get 60 frames per second just fine with an i7 and 8 gigabytes of RAM. But yeah, still playable. I suggest capping it at 40 frames per second.
This is dispatch. Target is still at large. Find him.
Sniper Elite 4, I'll be doing 1080p with DirectX 12, and I'll be using my own tweaked settings, reflections on low, anti-aliasing off, draw distance on high, no motion blur, tessellation or obscurance fields, and shadows on high, and I'll be very close to 60 frames per second. When there are explosions or X-ray cameras, you'll see drops below 60 frames per second, but so far the game is very responsive and not an issue for this CPU and GPU at all. The Witcher 3, I'll be doing 1080p with shadows, grass density, foliage visibility range and detail level on high, the rest on ultra, and on post processing I'll be using SSAO, anti-aliasing turn off, chromatic aberration and depth of field disabled too, and I'm going to be away from the city. Then I'll be going closer and closer to Novigrad till the center of it, and you'll see as I'm getting close the CPU usage will start to go up and the frame rate will lower a little bit, and you'll see that both the CPU and GPU are at 100%, so you can actually just lower the settings and you'll be getting around 55 frames per second at the most. You won't be getting 60s into Novigrad with this CPU, you need a better one, but outside Novigrad you should be fine. So yeah, playable, and if you want to play on ultra you can target 30 frames per second just fine.
Mages, mutants, blasphemers, kobolds.
The thinking best deal for real wireless disappeared.
My killing? Or we done a run?
Hierarch, whosoever conceals a mage in their home shall...
Assassin's Creed Unity, I'll be doing 1080p with a high preset, which means no anti-aliasing, bloom turn on, SSAO, high shadows, high textures and high environment quality, no GameWorks features or anything like that. I'll be running in Paris, fighting every now and then, and you'll see that I'm below 60 frames per second. You can be closer to 60 if you have a better CPU, but lowering the settings doesn't help that much in this game in particular, since the CPU is a limitation, so something to keep in mind, but yeah, still playable.
Doucement, citoyen.
The Division, I'll be doing 1080p with my tweak settings, which is some stuff on medium, some on high, some turn off, just look at it in the video. And I'll be targeting 60 frames per second. I'll be just running outside a little, then fighting some guys with flamethrowers, so we get more of a push to the GPU. I do see that the CPU usage is very high and the GPU usage too, so it's a good match in this one. So yeah, playable, with some drops every now and then due to the CPU.
Sarah was using the site as a mass grave, which explains why the cleaners have targeted it. Avoid contact if possible, but do what you have to do to make sure Rose gets us the juice we need. That is, if he's still alive.
Locating auxiliary relay. Sub-level 3.
Rise of the Tomb Raider, I'll be doing 1080p, and I'll be using some stuff on medium and others on high. Just check it in the video. This game is very demanding on both the GPU and CPU, but as you can see here, I'm maxing out the GPU and the CPU, so it's a good combo. I'm using both the components just fine. 60 frames per second at 1080p is difficult. With this CPU, it's not really possible to hit 60 all the time, but if you want to do it with the 1050 Ti, you have to use a better CPU and lower the graphics quite a bit. So I try to get the best performance, around 40 frames per second, that's what I wanted to have, and it is pretty close to that target. So yeah, still playable.
Lara, I'm sorry if Sophia was less than welcoming.
I understand. I'm just glad you were there to vouch for me.
My people have spent decades fighting outsiders. It's not an easy habit to break. See if you can lend a hand with the preparations. A little hard work would go a long way towards building trust.
I'll see what I can do.
Doom, I'll be doing 1080p, and I'll be using TSS-AA ATX. Shadows, lights, reflections, particles, all that kind of stuff will be on high, and the rest on ultra, using OpenGL 4.5. Personally, this ran better for me than Vulkan. Vulkan was like 3 frames behind, so keep that in mind. It's a very small difference, but in my case, OpenGL ran better. And this game is very close to 60 frames per second. Sometimes it drops to the low 50s, but it's very brief, so keep that in mind. It's not that bad. It's still very fluid and responsive, so yeah, highly recommend it. Forza Horizon 3, first of all, I'm going to be showing you here. I'm using the Pentium G4560 and the GTX 1050 Ti with 8 gigs of RAM, 2x4, so dual channel. You can see the task manager all the time while I'm recording this, so you can see what's going on. And here's the game itself. I'm using 1080p. And in the advanced graphics, I'll be using pretty much medium and a mix between medium and high. So keep that in mind, as you can see there. I'll be targeting 60 frames per second when possible. So yeah, let's jump into the game, shall we? So as you can see here, I'm below 60 frames per second pretty much all the time. A lot of cars on screen. I'm running into the city. The city is the worst performing part I saw so far. But yeah, the game is still playable. You can use much higher settings and target 30 frames per second without an issue. It will look better than Xbox One. You can crank up the resolution if you want, but it still needs a lot of work on the optimization. FIFA 17, I'm going to be doing 1440p. This one on 1080p is overkill, but as you can see, I'm using 1440p Ultra, MSA off, and I have unlocked frame rates. And as you can see, I'm over 100 frames per second. When there are cinematics or just free kicks or corner kicks, something like that, when you're behind the player, you'll have drops below 60, since that is capped at 30 frames per second. You can unlock the frame rate if you want by disabling V-Sync in the NVIDIA control panel, but it's a very short time, so you won't really have an issue with that. So yeah, the game runs just fine.
Argentina on the attack. There's a real attacking intent about them at the moment. Got a bit sloppy there, didn't concentrate, and they're on the back foot now.
That's frustrating. Just as they're getting higher up the pitch, they give the ball away.
Got a foot to the ball. That's offside, the referee's given it. Argentina looking to threaten.
And finally, CSGO. I'll be doing the maximum settings on 1080p, and I'm not using lower settings to get higher frame rates, since that's very hard to happen. The CPU usage is already very high. I use some commands in order to get to this frame rate, so check the description for a link on how to tweak the game correctly with some commands. But yeah, so far totally playable, over 100 frames per second. So yeah guys, that's all I had to say. As you can see, the games I tested were totally playable. The G4560 for a $60 CPU is a fantastic choice. In my opinion, the i3 is not worth the money anymore. It runs the same as the G4560 or 3 frames less than the i3-6100 and costs almost half of it, 60 instead of 115. Which is insane. And now building a PC is even cheaper than before. You can build what I have here for $450 US. Link in the description for the PC Part Picker link. It's not the same motherboard and RAM, since I found cheaper options, but you can have a very acceptable gaming PC with 450. Just check the link in the description to see the details, and you have the performance shown in this video. But an important thing to keep in mind, you'll need to upgrade the BIOS from the motherboard. Now that new BIOS updates were released, the manufacturer on the factory will upgrade the BIOS of the motherboard, so check with your seller on what BIOS is using. If not, you won't be able to use the G4560 with it. You need a compatible CPU to upgrade the BIOS, and then you can put the G4560, so keep that in mind. You also have a good upgrade path. You can even put a Kaby Lake i7 here if you want in the future, and it will offer way better performance. Highly recommended. So yeah guys, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.